My life completely changed one autumn morning in Montana. I was having coffee on the porch of the house I inherited from my grandpa, looking out over the 50 acres of land ahead of me, when I saw 3 construction trucks driving up my private road. This is the same road that, since 1975, had been used only by me and 3 neighbors. As a software developer, I chose to work remotely from here precisely because of the peace and quiet. The calm mountain scenery and fresh air always helped me stay focused. But that day, the sound of those trucks was the first sign of changes I wasn't ready to face. On the other side of the fence, a new luxury condo was starting to take shape. Mountain View Estates, with its $1.2 million homes, was about to transform our small, rural community. Little did I know, this invasion on my private road was only the beginning of a battle where I'd have to fight for every inch of what's rightfully mine. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this. In the first week after construction started, a woman in her 50s knocked on my door. She introduced herself as Elizabeth Miller, the president of the Mountain View Estates Homeowners Association, wearing a crisp blazer that really stood out against my work plaid shirt. With a rehearsed smile, she began talking about community integration and safety standards. At first, what she said sounded perfectly reasonable. She proposed installing an automated gate system and 24-hour security, all paid for by the condo. But there was a catch. The Homeowners Association would need to control who could access the road. When I politely asked about her motives, Elizabeth let slip that undesirable elements might gain access to those luxury homes through my property. My longtime neighbors, James, Robert, and William, who share the road with me, soon showed up, worried. They'd also gotten Elizabeth's friendly visit. As family farm owners, they relied on the road to haul their equipment and livestock. An association-controlled system could seriously mess up their daily routines. After looking into Elizabeth, I found out she was a newly retired executive from a major New York developer. Her move to Montana was part of that post-pandemic urban exodus, and she brought with her a mindset that just didn't fit our way of life. I tried to stay diplomatic, explaining that the road had been private property ever since my grandpa built it, fully documented and legally recorded. But when she realized her pitch wasn't working, her smile turned into a look of displeasure. She left with a, "You'll change your mind eventually," which sounded more like a threat than a goodbye. A week after Elizabeth's visit, I discovered a crew setting up posts for electronic gates at the entrance of my road. They had no permission and gave no warning. When I confronted them, they just said they were following orders from the Homeowners Association. I immediately called the police and recorded everything on my phone. While we waited, Elizabeth showed up in her fancy SUV, flanked by 2 men who introduced themselves as Mike and Dave, security guards hired by the association. She argued she was just looking out for the community, as if my property was part of her condo. Things got even tenser when I found that all the private property signs I'd installed along the road had mysteriously disappeared overnight. My security cameras even caught Mike and Dave taking the signs down on Elizabeth's direct orders. But she didn't stop there. Soon, word was spreading around Mountain View Estates about suspicious activity on my property. Apparently, I was letting criminal elements use the road as an escape route. Totally absurd, especially since I work from home and monitor every inch of my land. My closest neighbor, James, later told me that Elizabeth was pressuring other condo owners into signing a petition to force the modernization of the road, arguing that our dirt track was lowering their property values and posing a safety risk. The last straw was when Elizabeth started harassing my neighbors. Robert had his tractor blocked by one of the security vehicles while trying to get into his farm, and William received a threatening letter hinting at legal action if he kept using the road excessively. I knew I had to do something before things spiraled completely out of control. I gathered every piece of documentation I had: historical property records, security camera videos, statements from neighbors, and photos of those gate installation attempts. It was time to get professional legal help, not just to defend my rights, but also to protect the way of life my grandpa built on this slice of Montana. After doing some digging, I found Nathan Anderson, a lawyer specializing in real estate law and disputes with homeowners associations. In our first meeting, I laid out all the evidence I'd painstakingly collected over the past few weeks. Nathan looked over the original property records from my grandpa's era and confirmed that I was in a solid legal position. The road was undeniably part of my property, with easement rights granted only to the 3 longtime neighbors. Mountain View Estates had absolutely no rights over it. We decided to adopt a more aggressive strategy. Nathan discovered that the condo itself was riddled with zoning violations that the association was trying to hide. The original plans were approved with specific environmental restrictions that were now being ignored. Houses were built closer to property boundaries than allowed, and the drainage system was channeling rainwater onto adjacent lands, including mine. I even hired a professional surveyor to document the property boundaries and any violations. The report showed that some of the condo's structures had crept a few meters onto my land. In her rush to roll out her grand plans, Elizabeth hadn't even bothered to properly check the boundaries. Armed with these findings, Nathan filed a major lawsuit against the Homeowners Association. We weren't just defending ourselves. We were exposing a series of irregularities that could cost Mountain View Estates far more than just money. The looming negative publicity threatened the value of the properties Elizabeth had worked so hard to protect. The lawsuit included claims of harassment, attempted misappropriation of private property, defamation, and zoning violations. We even attached testimonies from my neighbors, detailing how their daily lives had been disrupted by the association's bullying tactics. The real shocker came when Nathan found out that Elizabeth had overstepped her authority as the association's president. She had hired the security guards and approved the gate installations without the proper board approval, misusing association funds along the way. Some board members, once they learned what she'd done, were visibly shaken by the legal risks she had created. To further strengthen our case, I set up a state-of-the-art camera system at strategic spots on the property. Every act of interference was now captured in high definition, complete with date and timestamps. The footage clearly showed the guards removing my signs and messing with my neighbor's legitimate use of the road. Nathan also discovered that Elizabeth had a history of similar conflicts back in New York, where she'd tried to force small property owners to sell up for development projects. She turned her corporate experience into bullying tactics, thinking her influence and resources would be enough to break local resistance. With all this evidence in hand, Nathan assured me that we were in a strong position, not only to defend my rights, but also to demand significant compensation for all the hassle. The legal battle was about to begin, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt confident that I could protect my grandpa's legacy. The lawsuit hit the Homeowners Association like a hurricane. At first, Elizabeth tried to discredit my claims, arguing that I was getting in the way of the region's inevitable progress. But her arguments quickly fell apart as the evidence piled up during the preliminary hearings. The security camera footage was especially devastating. The judge showed clear disapproval as the videos revealed the guards taking down my signs and interfering with my neighbor's farming operations. Every new piece of evidence made Elizabeth's expression turn more and more uneasy. The surveyor's report was another turning point. When the zoning violations were exposed, many Mountain View Estates owners started questioning Elizabeth's leadership. They'd invested millions in houses that were now facing serious legal issues. The faulty drainage system was already causing visible erosion in some areas, and those structures creeping onto neighboring properties would have to be fixed. Nathan was brilliant in his arguments. He showed how Elizabeth had systematically overstepped her authority, using association funds without proper approval, and pushing policies that not only violated my property rights, but also clashed with county regulations. During her testimony, Elizabeth tried to keep up her executive act, but her story fell apart once Nathan presented documents from her previous conflicts in New York. Her attempt to paint herself as a community leader concerned about safety was completely undercut by a clear pattern of bullying small property owners. The decisive moment came when two members of the association board decided to testify against her. They revealed how she'd manipulated meetings, hidden crucial information, and made unilateral decisions that now left all the residents facing significant legal liabilities. James, Robert, and William also delivered powerful testimonies. Their stories of generations working the land and relying on the road for their livelihood were a stark contrast to Elizabeth's superficial concerns about appearance and exclusivity. The judge, being a longtime Montanan himself, seemed especially receptive to their words. As the case progressed, Elizabeth's position at Mountain View Estates began to crumble. Concerned property owners started showing up in droves at association meetings, demanding a change in leadership. Even the association's lawyer, seeing the gravity of the situation, started pushing for a settlement. Nathan and I spent a long time hashing out what terms we'd accept. It wasn't just about the money. We needed solid guarantees that this would never happen again. I wanted to secure not just my rights, but also protect my neighbors from any future bullying. The settlement proposal we put together was comprehensive. Financial compensation for the damages, full coverage of all legal fees, a formal non-interference agreement with detailed guidelines about road usage, and the removal of Elizabeth as the association's president. Plus, We included clauses forcing the condo to fix all the zoning violations and issue a formal apology. When we presented our proposal, it was clear the association had very few options. Continuing the litigation would only dredge up more issues and drive up costs. It was time to close this chapter and start rebuilding community relationships. The Homeowners Association accepted every term of the settlement, and Elizabeth resigned as president that very week. The new board, led by a local who really understood Montana's culture, immediately started fixing the zoning violations. All attempts to control my road came to a complete stop. Using the financial compensation I received, I decided to invest in preserving the property. I set up a more advanced drainage system to protect the road during heavy rains and hired a local company for regular maintenance, ensuring it stayed safe for everything from everyday cars to farm equipment. The most surprising part was the shift in the community after the conflict was resolved. Several Mountain View Estates residents came over personally to apologize, admitting they'd been swayed by Elizabeth's rhetoric without really knowing the history and importance of the area. One of them, Michael, a retired chef from Seattle, even started buying organic produce directly from Robert's farm. James used the opportunity to set up a little local produce market on his property, which quickly became the Saturday hangout spot. The new residents began to see the value in local farming and in our rural community that was once under threat. The road that Elizabeth had so desperately wanted to control now served as a vital link that connected the old Montana with the new. William, usually the quiet one, shocked everyone by emerging as a vocal advocate for protecting Montana's farmland. His experience during the conflict pushed him into local politics, and now he's working on laws to safeguard historic properties from exploitative development. Mountain View Estates itself transformed remarkably. The new board, made up of residents who really get the local vibe, put in place initiatives that benefit the whole community. They set up a fund to support local farmers and introduced building guidelines that respect both modern designs and the region's historic character. My dirt road, the spark behind all this change, has become a symbol of what we can achieve when very different worlds find common ground. The condo residents now appreciate its rustic charm, understanding that it's a tangible link to Montana's history. The historical documentation project I started has grown significantly. With the help of a local historian, we assembled an extensive archive of photos, documents, and oral histories from the pioneer families. This material is now part of the State Library's collection, ensuring that future generations understand the importance of preserving our cultural heritage. Recently, I even received an unexpected letter from one of the ex-security guys Elizabeth had hired. Mike wrote to apologize and say that the whole experience made him rethink his own choices. Now, he works as a forest ranger and often uses our story as a prime example of how not to handle community conflicts. The irony isn't lost on me. Elizabeth's attempt to forcibly modernize our community ended up strengthening exactly the values she wanted to erase. Her quest for exclusivity and control only brought about a community that's now more inclusive and collaborative than ever. Sitting on my porch at dusk, I watched the constant flow of vehicles along the road. Tractors, hay trucks, luxury cars, all sharing the same dusty path. Every single time one goes by, I'm reminded that real progress doesn't come from forcefully imposing changes, but from finding ways to honor the past while embracing the future. My grandpa's legacy hasn't just survived, it's flourished in ways he could never have imagined. His simple dirt road is a daily reminder that sometimes you've got to fight for what's right, not just for yourself, but for an entire community. Last spring, we held a special celebration to mark the 75th anniversary of the road's construction. The event brought together everyone, from the longtime farmers to the newest residents of Mountain View Estates. We set up long outdoor tables near the old oak tree where my grandpa used to sit back during the road's original construction. The most touching moment of the party came when we discovered, buried at the base of that oak, an old coffee can that my grandpa had left as a time capsule. Inside, there were some old tools, a hand-drawn map of the property, and a letter addressed to future generations. His simple but heartfelt words about building not just roads, but real connections between people, moved everyone there. During the celebration, residents shared stories about how the road had impacted their lives. One couple mentioned that their kids now prefer taking the long way along our dirt road to get to school, just to see the farm animals and wave at the farmers. Robert even pulled out his restored old tractor, the very one his dad used decades ago to haul the harvest. The new president of the Homeowners Association announced the creation of a permanent fund for local historical preservation, naming it in honor of my grandpa. This fund would help maintain not only our road, but also other historical landmarks in the area that were at risk of being lost to rampant development. By the end of the day, as we watched the sunset turn the mountains golden, I realized our little dirt road had become much more than just an access route. It was a living symbol of how a community can thrive when it chooses to preserve its history while welcoming positive change. Now, my grandpa's letter hangs in a frame at James's Market, reminding everyone passing by that sometimes the truest progress lies in protecting what already works perfectly. Our dirt road remains just as it always was, a simple path connecting people, stories, and generations. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this. Today, whenever I drive along my grandpa's road, I often catch myself reflecting on how a simple dirt path can teach so many valuable lessons. Our fight wasn't just about property rights or access. It was a real test of values, community, and perseverance. Mountain View Estates keeps growing, but this time it's growing in a way that respects the character of the land. New residents are welcomed with a little welcome packet that includes the local history and an invitation to get involved in community activities. Many of them have become passionate advocates for local preservation. The story of our legal battle has even spread beyond our borders. Every now and then, other rural communities facing similar challenges drop by, and we share our experience, stressing how important it is to stand firm when defending historical heritage, even when the pressure seems too much. What impresses me most is seeing the local kids grow up with such a deep appreciation for this place. They know the names of the pioneer families, understand the importance of local farming, and truly value the simplicity of a dirt road that carries so many stories. For them, tractors and fancy cars aren't symbols of division, they're simply part of the same diverse community we call home. Just last week, I heard that Elizabeth was selling her house in Jackson Hole. Apparently, the gated community she chose is now dealing with its own internal issues. I can't help but find it ironic that she's still chasing that idealized version of community, while we reached ours simply by preserving what we already had. My grandpa's road remains exactly how it's always been, unpaved, without gates or guards. It still does what it was meant to do, connect people and make life easier for those who work the land. But now it also carries extra meaning, a tangible reminder that some battles are worth fighting, and that true progress doesn't always mean change. As my grandpa wrote in his letter found in the time capsule, a road is more than just a path from one place to another. It's a promise of connection for future generations. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this.